In this episode, I'm going to tell you why the traditional personal development and self-help worlds are flawed and why they don't work for most people. They didn't work for me. They may not have worked for you. I'm going to explain why that is and how there's a different way forward. And this is a big episode for me because I spent so long in the old personal development world. Probably 15, 20 years ago was the first time I got my first book. I can still remember my uncle's mate giving me a Robert Kiyosaki book. It wasn't his most famous book, if you know him, is Rich Dad Poor Dad. But he had another one which was a follow-up called Cash Flow Quadrant or something like that. It was the first personal development book anyone had ever given to me. I was in my early 20s. I remember reading it and thinking, oh, there's a way we can learn from other people here. This is gold dust. And it just set me off on this path, sent me down rabbit holes as these things tend to do. And I just immersed myself in that world. The likes of Tony Robbins, after that Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V, all kinds of people, all traditional stuff. Most of the stuff that you'll have seen, which is how to rev yourself up and how to keep yourself motivated and how to push yourself forward. And I did that for years. And I built a legal career, ended up leaving big corporate law firms and setting up my own law firm, had multiple businesses, property development business, and I did everything that those worlds tell us to do. I used all the tricks. I used the cold showers, I used the getting up in the morning with gym gear next to your bed to make sure you get up and run, changing your state, listening to powerful music, and it pushed me through to the point where I ended up depressed and miserable and suicidal. Like, my life got really dark. And I see this pattern time and time again, not just in people who come to me for coaching, and I see it on a personal level, but I see it in friends who are also in that world, and I see it online. I see people following this traditional path and ended up in a bad place. So I want to tell you what I've discovered in my life, what I've unpicked from that, and show you how there's a different way, and the way I think is a better way forward. My approach to this stuff is always the same. It's important you figure out what works for you. I will always bring it back to you. This isn't about you copying what I did. This is about me sharing with you what I've learned, and then you taking it away, internalizing things and making it fit for your life. That's what I've done. That's what I encourage everybody to do. One of the biggest flaws in the personal development world and self-help world is that people just get evangelical about what they have done and want you to copy them. They think everybody should do what they did because what they did worked for them. It's well intentioned, but it's flawed. But there's a deeper thing that's flawed about the traditional stuff. So let's get into that now. And to highlight it, I'm going to show you a short, YouTube short, or let you listen to it if you listen to it on the podcast, that I saw a few weeks ago, and it just highlighted this point for me. I see this stuff a lot and it makes my heart sink. And it's of Tony Robbins talking about self-esteem. So have a listen to this, have a watch of this, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
When people say to me, I have no self-esteem, I hate that word. It's so overused and abused. I don't have any self-esteem because when I was growing up, my parents said these terrible things and those terrible things. And I said, isn't it convenient you only remembered those things? Someone can tell your whole life you're a piece of crap, but you can say, screw you, read between the lines and make your life work. Someone tell your whole life you're beautiful, you're intelligent, you're the smartest person in the world, and you don't believe it. Because self-esteem doesn't come from what people say about you. Self-esteem is earned within yourself. It's esteem for yourself, which only comes by doing things that are incredibly difficult, and then your brain goes, this is who I am.
So there you go. That's Tony Robbins. Now, it's really important that I say, before I get into this, you might expect someone who's about to comment on what you've just heard or seen to be someone who doesn't like Tony Robbins and doesn't like what he stands for and doesn't like the other people like him in this world. That couldn't be further from the truth. I love Tony Robbins. I love all the people I've mentioned earlier. I love everybody in this space pretty much because they're all doing good. They're all trying to help other people, mainly. All the well-intentioned ones. That obviously doesn't speak for everybody. Before you start throwing things, different names on the internet at me. I don't know every person in the self-help world, obviously, so I'm being very generalised here. But let's talk about Tony Robbins in particular. If it wasn't for Tony Robbins, I wouldn't be sitting here now talking to you. Tony Robbins played a hugely important part on my path to where I am, and I will forever be grateful for that. I still agree with a load of things he says, and you'll see this as we go into it, there's just, for me, something that is missing from what he talks about and what other people in that space talk about. And there are other people within the self-help space who talk about this stuff in the same way I do, obviously, which is where I've learned it from. So listen to what he's saying, right? It annoys him that people talk about self-esteem and they all fall back on that and they all go, oh, it's because my parents did this to me when I was a kid, and you just so happen to not remember the good stuff that your parents said, and it's all about just, what you do now. Self-esteem is about what you do now and how you feel about yourself now. Now, there's bits in that I agree with and bits that I disagree with, but it's the silent stuff I disagree with, really. The bits I agree with is that building your self-esteem and changing life is up to you. It doesn't matter what happened to you in the past, fundamentally. Sooner or later, I say this to all my clients, I've said it to myself in my own life, sooner or later we have to get to a point where we just make different decisions. We just do things differently. If we don't take different actions, we won't change. It's one of the things that in the work I do, I've brought loads of different stuff together, because most people who focus on psychology and emotions don't do enough practical stuff. And most people who do practical stuff don't focus enough on psychology and emotions. That's where the traditional worlds are flawed, fundamentally. For me, the Tony Robbins approach is too focused on practical stuff, and it skips past this bit. So when he says, when you just happen to remember what the bad stuff that your mum and dad did to you, that's true, because that's the way our systems are set up. That's what trauma is. But to then just say you've just got to push past it is where the problem is, because it misses a bit in the middle. It reminds me of a story I heard once about a monastery full of monks. And this monastery was, as you can just picture what you'd picture monks to be in a monastery in the middle of Tibet. Very peaceful, very loving, very caring. These monks were all about forgiveness and moving. So whatever you experience in life, you move straight to forgiveness and empathy and compassion. And these monks all started to develop physical problems. They all started to develop health problems. This is a separate side of the stuff I talk about deeper further down the line, but it's all connected. And the reason they discovered this was happening was for the same bit that I think the Tony Robbins world of the personal development and the self-help worlds are flawed. It jumps over a very important middle bit. And that's what's happening to most people who try to change their life in this world. You start out where you are, and then you want to get to where you want to be. If you haven't watched or listened to the last 2 episodes, go back and listen to them. They are crucial for this. Figuring out where you are and figuring out where you want to be. The problem with the traditional self-help world is they say just force that through, just force the change through. But it misses out this big middle bit that my work is focused on. And by trying to force it through, what happens is you're just consciously trying to change everything without dealing with what the cause of the problem is underneath. So go back to what I said before about perfect example. You'll hear people say, well, if you want to start running every day, you need to practically make it easy for yourself. So you put your gym gear by the bed. When you wake up in the morning, your gym gear is there. You've got no excuse. Put it on, get out. What most people experience, and I experienced by doing it that way, is you will consciously force yourself to do that for a certain period of time. You will force yourself into the new world for a while. But because you've missed this bit in the middle, it's this bit in the middle that will sooner or later drag you back to the beginning. And that's the loop most people are stuck in. Maybe you're stuck in that loop. Maybe this is what you're experiencing right now, which is why you're listening to this. You've tried just forcing yourself over into the new thing. You've tried forcing yourself to lose weight. You've tried forcing yourself to make more money. You've tried forcing yourself to get fit or have a better relationship. And after a while, you just find it drags you back again to where you were. And you just get stuck in this loop. And that gets soul destroying. And the more we try and push through that, the more we try and just ignore this middle bit, the worse it gets. Because we get more and more depressed. Because fundamentally what we're doing is suppressing what's going on in the middle. And that is at the core of the work that I do. We're going to get into what that work is in the next couple of episodes. But that's fundamentally what is wrong with the self-help world. They're trying to force things through consciously. Now that's why what you'll see with any example you've got of ways to change your life, right? Whether it's a diet plan or a fitness plan, there are always going to be examples of people it worked for because it just happened to work for them it fitted them. So there are people who, for example, with the Tony Robbins stuff, Tony Robbins himself is a perfect example of this. That's why he's evangelical about it. If you get up every day and you jump in an ice bath and that gets you sorted and it works for you, brilliant. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. Do it. If that works for you long term, great. It does work for some people. What I'm saying is, for 95%, maybe 99% of people, it doesn't work, and that's why you end up getting stuck in this loop. I remember seeing Gary Vee talking live probably 5-6 years ago now, and it was a really important part of my journey to sitting here now talking to you, because he was saying how, you know, he's got millions of people who follow him and listen to his advice, and they only follow him because they want to make changes, they want to change their life. But he said 99% of those people don't make the changes, and he can't understand that, and he just carried on then. He just moved on with his speech. And as he said it, I thought, but isn't that fascinating? Aren't they the most fascinating people? Because that's 99% of the millions of people who follow him want to change, listen to him, and still don't change. They're not like the other billions of people who aren't interested in Gary Vee and aren't interested in changing their life. They are obviously interested in changing and are getting stuck. And that to me, it rang a bell that said, well, they're the 99%. They're the people I'm interested in, that 99%. That's probably you. That's who I was before. Why are we getting stuck? Why aren't we changing even though we want to? And that's what I started focusing on in my work. And that's how I figured out how to change from the root, instead of dicking around with the surface level stuff and trying to force it through like everybody else is trying to get us to do. So if that resonates with you, click the like button on this video if you are watching on YouTube. Leave a review on the podcast if you listen to it on podcast. Help get this out to more people. If you think this is not a way you've thought of thinking about this before, help me get it out to more people by doing that. If you really like this, click the subscribe button on YouTube. Let me know in the comments what you think, and then we'll go into the next part of this, which is why my system is different, why the work I figured out, I've pulled stuff from all around the world, and why it's different to the traditional personal development and self-help worlds. If you want to see that, click here. If you're on YouTube, go to the next episode. If you're on the podcasts, and I'll see you there. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. See you soon. Have a great day.